In the stillness of dawn, two young boys vanish from a family hiking trip near Wild Pine Reserve, a vast, uncharted forest on the edge of Oregon. At first, it appears to be a tragic case of lost children. But when a third boy is found wandering miles away, barefoot and mute, drawing strange symbols in the dirt, the case spirals into something far darker than a simple disappearance. As Agent Rhodes and her team dig deeper, they uncover a trail of missing children stretching back decades, all tied to whispered legends, a ritual circle, and a woman who lives where maps go blank. But the deeper they search, the more the forest seems to push back, hiding truths, erasing signs, and offering only one sound in return, a haunting whistle echoing through the trees. What began as a search and rescue will become a descent into an ancient pattern, one that demands silence, obedience, and a seventh child to complete the circle. The Reyes family had planned the trip for months, a quiet weekend in the Wild Pine Reserve, far from the buzz of Portland, far from deadlines, screens, and schedules. Jordan Reyes, a graphic designer burned out from back-to-back projects, and his wife, Alina, a high school biology teacher, wanted nothing more than to reconnect with their twin sons, Noah and Elias, away from the relentless pace of suburban life. At 10 years old, the boys were curious, imaginative, and inseparable, one always finishing the other's sentence, always laughing at inside jokes only twins could understand. Alina found the cabin on a forest hiking forum. Perfect for family detox, the ad had said. Isolated but safe, surrounded by pines, a view of the stars. She posted a simple question in the forum: any kid-friendly trails near Wild Pine Reserve? She got 3 replies. One of them had no username, just a smiley face. They chose the cabin anyway. On Friday afternoon, the drive up the mountain was peaceful. The road wound through tunnels of Douglas firs, and when they finally arrived, the air was crisp, carrying the scent of moss and cold soil. The cabin itself was charming, in an aged sort of way. Creaky wooden steps, a moss-covered roof, and a narrow porch overlooking the woods. No Wi-Fi, no TV. Just a stack of board games, a pile of firewood, and the murmur of wind rustling leaves. The boys groaned at first, clutching their handheld consoles until Alina took them away with a smile. One weekend, she said, just us. That night, they made s'mores by the fire pit, told ghost stories under a navy sky freckled with stars. Noah leaned into Jordan's side, his laughter echoing off the trees. Elias fell asleep in Alina's lap before she even finished reading from the campfire book. They carried the boys to their bunk beds, kissed their foreheads, and went to sleep smiling. The silence of the forest, deeper than any city hush, wrapped around them like a lullaby. But silence can turn quickly. On Saturday morning, Jordan woke at 6:12 a.m., stirred by something he couldn't explain. A breeze, a whisper, the soft creak of wood. He wasn't sure. He stretched, got up to start coffee, then peered into the boys' room. Empty. At first, it didn't register. He assumed they were outside, maybe throwing rocks into the creek or chasing squirrels. But when he stepped onto the porch and called out, there was no answer, not even birdsong. He walked around the perimeter, calling again. Noah? Elias? Still nothing. He went back inside, now with a tightness in his chest. Alina, he called softly. Have you seen the boys? She came to the door, hair tousled, her eyes still full of sleep. What? They're not in their beds. At first she smiled, but the smile faded fast. Her voice dropped. What do you mean they're not in their beds? Together they scoured the surrounding area. The creek, the trail, the fire pit. They called, shouted, screamed, but the forest gave nothing back. No movement, no echo, no laughter, just trees standing like sentinels and a kind of stillness that felt almost deliberate. Alina was the first to panic. Her hands trembled as she fumbled with her phone, realizing there was still no signal. Jordan drove down the road until he found a ranger outpost and screamed through the door until someone came running. By 9 a.m., a full search team was on site. By noon, dogs were brought in. By evening, the sky was darkening and helicopters circled above, scanning with thermal imaging. And yet, nothing. No footprints, no torn fabric, no broken branches, as if the boys had simply dissolved into the air. One hiker, an older man camping about a mile out, told rangers he'd heard something strange just before dawn. Faint giggles, he said, like children playing in the woods. Then it just stopped. There was no sign of struggle, no sign of exit, just two twin-sized indentations in their bunk beds and two untouched backpacks sitting near the door. The only item missing, a flashlight. Elise collapsed when the ranger said they had to pause the search for the night. "We'll resume at first light," they assured her. But the light never brought clarity. The next day was the same, then the next. The search widened. Local volunteers joined. Drones flew overhead. A scent dog caught something, but it led to nothing. After a week, the media picked up the story. After 2 months, the media let it go. After 5 months, even the rangers stopped coming. The Reyes family left the cabin, but the mountains never left them. Alina printed out hundreds of flyers, kept a Facebook page updated daily. Jordan stopped working altogether, spending his nights analyzing satellite maps, wilderness trails, old topography logs. They slept in shifts in case one of the boys came home, but home stayed quiet. The world moved on. 11 months passed, then everything changed. 11 months to the day after Noah and Elias Reyes disappeared, a 21-year-old tech intern named Eli Tron sat alone in a cramped trailer outside Bend, Oregon, sipping lukewarm coffee and waiting for his drone battery to finish charging. The air was brittle, laced with the pine and frost of early spring, and Eli, quiet, methodical, a bit of a loner, was preparing to field test a prototype drone equipped with a new wildlife tracking camera system. His goal that afternoon was simple: capture footage of elk migration patterns across a remote section of Wild Pine Reserve. The area was steep and unpopulated, terrain so rough that even trail markers had long eroded into moss. Locals called the region Cutthroat Hollow. To Eli, it was just another sector on a grid. He launched the drone at 2:44 p.m., his fingers deftly maneuvering the controls as the device lifted above the treetops, its hum quickly swallowed by the vast silence. From the sky, the forest looked like a sea of green, broken by narrow veins of stone and shadow. Eli watched the feed closely, occasionally tilting the camera to scan for movement among the brush. Nothing. Just a family of deer near a stream. He marked the timestamp, made a note, and let the drone drift further northeast, toward a ridge where vegetation thinned around a cliff band. He was just about to turn back when something flickered at the edge of the frame. It was barely perceptible, a twitch of movement beneath the pines. He paused, rewound, watched again. Two figures, small, maybe child-sized, standing just beyond a curtain of pine branches. They moved strangely, not like hikers or campers, but cautious, uneven. Eli's heart began to pound. He zoomed in slowly. The resolution wasn't perfect, but details emerged. Tangled hair, tattered sleeves, one figure slightly taller, the other leaning forward as if shielding himself. They were staring straight at the drone. He froze the frame. His hands shook as he reached for his laptop, dragging the footage into a side-by-side viewer. Then he opened a browser and typed, "Reyes Twins Oregon missing." Within seconds, a familiar photo appeared. Two boys smiling in matching red jackets, taken a week before they vanished. Eli compared the image to his drone footage. Same height, same face shape. Even the hoodie, yellow, faded in the footage, matched what Noah had been last seen wearing. One of the boys had his left sleeve rolled to the elbow, just like in the photo. Eli didn't sleep that night. He watched the clip over and over, zoomed, enhanced, froze each frame. Every time he grew more convinced. He checked the metadata. The drone had flown over a section of Cutthroat Hollow that had never been part of the original search zone. No trails led in, no paths led out. It was a dead zone, dense, brutal, forgotten. And now, maybe not so empty after all. At 7:08 a.m. the next morning, Eli showed up at the Deschutes County Sheriff's Office with his laptop. The deputy on duty, a heavy-set man with weary eyes, barely looked up. "You lost something?" "No," Eli said, "but I think I found someone." The deputy was dismissive until he saw the footage. By 9 a.m., the sheriff, the county ranger chief, and 3 plainclothes investigators had gathered around Eli's laptop. Coordinates were cross-referenced, terrain maps pulled. They matched the frame to a sector deep within the reserve, an area previously deemed too treacherous and too far afield to be connected to the Reyes disappearance. "This is past the hollow cut," one ranger murmured. "Nobody goes in there, not even hunters." "Well," the sheriff said, voice low, "someone went in or never left." Within 48 hours, a tactical rescue team was mobilized. Helicopters were dismissed due to canopy density. The approach would have to be on foot, with infrared drones ahead and motion sensors deployed in a wide arc. Quietly, Eli was asked to assist in guiding the search party, using his drone's flight path and terrain knowledge. Alina and Jordan were contacted. Alina nearly collapsed when she saw the paused frame. "That's them," she whispered, her voice cracking. "That's my boys." Jordan didn't speak. His eyes stayed locked on the screen, fists clenched so tight his knuckles turned bone white. They had lived 11 months in a nightmare, and now a single blurry image had reopened the wound, and this time it bled hope. The search team departed before dawn 2 days later. Armed with thermal imaging, long-range mics, and light packs, they moved like shadows into the forest. The terrain fought them. Thick underbrush, jagged inclines, roots like tripwires. But the adrenaline was real. They weren't searching for closure now. They were searching for life. At 6:17 a.m., the thermal drone swept past the overhang near a steep ravine. A ranger named Harris caught it first. A ripple of heat, hidden beneath branches and a stone shelf. "2 signatures," he radioed in. "Stationary, human-sized." The team descended rapidly. They found them just before midday. Under a makeshift canopy of sticks and tarp, 2 small figures huddled together. One had his arm around the other, eyes wide, skin pale, lips dry and cracked. Their clothes were barely intact. One of them looked up slowly as the rescuers approached, blinking against the sudden movement. "I'm Noah," he whispered. The other boy didn't speak, just stared, trembling. Medics swarmed in with water, blankets, glucose packs. But as they began stabilizing the boys, one of the rangers called out, his voice sharp, alert. Less than 20 feet away, nestled beneath brush, was a weathered backpack. It wasn't in the original Reyes family inventory. Inside were canned goods, a pocket knife, a flashlight with working batteries, and stitched into the lining, nearly faded to gray, was a name. M. Reed. No one recognized it, but it was the first piece of a puzzle that would unlock something far darker than anyone had imagined. Dot. The name stitched into the backpack, M. Reed, set off a chain reaction. Within an hour, law enforcement systems were cross-referencing every registered camper, park employee, and local resident ever documented near Wild Pine Reserve. They found him in a forgotten personnel file. Malcolm Reed, a former wilderness survival instructor with the Oregon Trail Scouts, dismissed 15 years ago after a psychological evaluation, deemed him unfit to work with minors. No charges were ever filed, but a sealed complaint from a family in 2008 surfaced. A boy reportedly returned from a weekend survival course bruised and terrified, whispering about the man with bark on his face. The case had gone nowhere. Reed vanished a year later, last seen living off-grid in a cabin near Mount Jefferson, a cabin that, according to land records, was never formally condemned, but had since disappeared from satellite imagery. Now, his name was sewn into a backpack 20 feet from where 2 missing boys had just been found alive. Investigators fanned out in all directions, mapping a 3-mile radius around the ravine. A separate team with canine units swept the nearby slope. Within the hour, one officer radioed in. "You're going to want to see this." Half covered in pine needles and nearly consumed by undergrowth was what could only be described as a crude encampment. Not built for comfort, but for concealment. A faded tarp strung between branches, a ring of fire-blackened stones, a pile of bones, animal but meticulously cleaned, and beside the fire pit, a figure carved from wood, no more than 8 inches tall. It had the unmistakable outline of a child. Thin limbs, long hair, hollow eyes. At its feet, someone had etched the number 5. Back at the shelter, as medics treated the boys, Elias remained mute, flinching at every unfamiliar movement. Noah, more lucid now, drank water slowly and kept glancing toward the trees. When asked how they survived, he repeated the same sentence, voice flat. "We weren't alone." Paramedics noted the boys showed no signs of advanced starvation. Malnourished, yes, but stable. Their injuries, scrapes, cuts, and older bruises, suggested long-term exposure, but also intermittent care. Someone had been feeding them. Someone who knew how to live out here, and someone who had a system. A second search unit, deployed a quarter-mile from the discovery site, stumbled upon what looked like a hidden trail, half-covered, half-trodden, leading downhill to the remnants of an old woodshed. Inside, under a collapsed beam, they found more carvings, this time dozens. All children, all twins. Some bore facial expressions, some were missing limbs. One had a long scratch carved down its back. On a rotting shelf was a notebook, warped with moisture, filled with jagged handwriting and pages torn or stained. Most of it was incoherent, ramblings about the chosen, the quiet ones, and the stars overhead. But one line repeated, "The forest takes, the forest gives back." The notebook was rushed to the sheriff's office, where Detective Helena Marlowe, now leading the case, studied every page. In the hospital, Noah had fallen asleep again, sedated after a panic episode. But Elias had started to draw. Silently, with crayons offered by a nurse, he sketched a picture of a cabin, a man with no face, and behind him, a tall woman draped in cloth. He labeled them not with names, but numbers. 4, 5. And under the woman's feet, he scribbled something else, symbols that resembled a six-pointed star with one line crossed out. Meanwhile, digital analysts enhanced Eli Tran's original drone footage, and in one frame missed during the initial scan, they found something chilling, a glimpse of a second shelter hidden deeper in the tree line. A figure stood near it, tall, still, head tilted upward, as if watching the drone. She was wrapped in layered cloth, her face obscured by shadow. She didn't run. She just watched. The footage was sent to federal analysts. Within hours, a decision was made. This was no longer a local recovery. It was the start of a multi-state investigation into something far bigger than a single disappearance. Interviews with local hikers were revisited. Several recalled eerie encounters from past years. A woman humming in the woods. Children glimpsed behind trees. Strange wooden tokens left near trailheads. None had been believed. Until now. In a private room at the hospital, Alina sat beside her sons, holding one hand each. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed red. Jordan stood behind her, stiff and silent. A trauma specialist approached gently and asked if Noah had ever mentioned a name. Alina shook her head. Just numbers. Just him. That night, as Alina dozed in the chair, Elias whispered for the first time in 11 months. "There were more of us." The nurse leaned in. "More?" Elias nodded slowly. "But they're not there anymore." "Where did they go?" "She picked them," he said, "one by one, then gone." Across town, Detective Marlowe opened a new case file. At the top, she wrote, "Active Predator Operation, Reed Soline Unknown Network." Then she turned back to the evidence. Carvings, maps, numbers, whispers. Somewhere out there, someone had created a system. Somewhere out there, more children might still be waiting. By dawn the next morning, word of the drone footage had made its way to a federal task force specializing in rural trafficking patterns. Satellite imagery of the Wild Pine Reserve was reanalyzed, and thermal drone scans were dispatched over the sector where the twin boys had been found. At 3:14 a.m., one such scan picked up 7 heat signatures clustered together near a rock formation. 6 small, 1 taller than the rest. The figures weren't standing. They were crouched, huddled close, almost as if shielding themselves. But what unsettled the drone pilot most was the tallest one, a human-shaped silhouette wrapped in multiple layers of fabric, standing still, completely upright. Eyes, though pixelated, clearly trained on the sky. She didn't run. She didn't hide. She just watched. The pilot flagged the footage immediately. It was passed through 2 different federal systems before landing in the hands of Agent Sierra Rhodes, a seasoned profiler with the Department of Interior's Missing Persons Unit. Her first reaction was physical, a chill at the back of her neck that didn't fade. She'd seen rural cults, she'd studied lone predators, but this was different. These children weren't chained. They weren't bleeding. They weren't screaming. They were still. And that woman, Soline, as Elias had whispered, was not restraining them. She was standing over them, as if she believed they belonged to her. At St. Luke's Trauma Center, Noah and Elias remained under sedation, recovering slowly. Elias, still mostly mute, had begun drawing symbols on his bed sheets with a juice-stained fingertip, repeating the star with 6 lines, always 1 or 2 scratched out. Noah, meanwhile, had moments of lucidity, short bursts, words that felt rehearsed. "The forest listens. She said we were chosen. We had to be quiet when it rained." But the sentence that froze the nurse came at 6:42 a.m., when Noah stirred from sleep, looked directly at the ceiling, and said, "She told us we were numbers, not names. I was 4. Eli was 5. She said 1 and 2 didn't listen." Then he turned his face into the pillow and wept. Agent Rhodes arrived at the hospital just as Elise was stepping out of the trauma wing to take a breath. They met near the vending machines, the fluorescent lights overhead humming faintly. "You said they drew symbols?" Rhodes asked gently. Elise nodded. "Stars, always 6. One line crossed out." Rhodes handed her a photo. This was taken 3 hours ago from a drone sweep, same area where Noah and Elias were found. Elise stared at the image. 7 heat shapes, 1 standing, 6 crouched. "That's her," she whispered. "That's Soline." "And if your sons are 4 and 5, Rhodes said quietly, "then we're missing 6. "No," Elise whispered. "We're missing 1 through 6. The map of the area surrounding Cutthroat Hollow was updated with fresh coordinates. Old trail cameras were reactivated. A search pattern grid was redrawn. The goal was no longer just rescue, it was disruption. Something was operating within the folds of this forest, hidden beneath centuries of unmarked terrain and local myth. Rhodes briefed a special operations unit. "She's not just a guardian. She's not a kidnapper in the traditional sense. She believes she's saving them." "How do you know?" one agent asked. Rhodes tapped a folder. Inside were 4 charcoal drawings recovered from the cabin under the ravine. Each depicted children asleep, safe, curled into themselves like forest animals. In each, Soline stood nearby, arms open, palms out, like some twisted maternal deity. And at the bottom of one page, in a child's handwriting, were the words, "She says the forest only wants the quiet ones." Back at the hospital, Elias finally spoke again, just 2 words. "She's watching." When the nurse asked who, he didn't answer. He turned to the window, his eyes searching the line where trees met sky. And far beyond that window, somewhere deep within the forgotten quadrants of Wild Pine Reserve, a figure wrapped in fabric stood on a cliff, still and silent, staring at the distant lights of the town. Below her, 6 children stirred beside a fireless pit, and in her hand, Soline held a carved figurine, its face smooth, its limbs thin, and a number etched into its chest. 6. And somewhere beyond the ridge, someone else was coming, a shape with a limp, a man whistling a slow, eerie tune, 1 long note, 2 short, the signal, the same pattern Elias once heard in the dead of night before the others disappeared. The forest wasn't finished. It had only just begun. As dawn broke over Wild Pine Reserve, the tactical unit led by Agent Rhodes began combing the newly marked grid around the ravine. Every movement was silent, every boot placed deliberately. Motion sensors had been deployed in a 1.2-mile radius, and infrared drones hovered quietly above the canopy, scanning for heat signatures. But what unnerved the team wasn't the stillness. It was what they found in the soil just west of the original shelter. A trench carved into the hillside, half filled with fresh dirt, partially hidden by pine debris. Inside, under a plastic tarp, were 2 makeshift bedrolls, a crudely drawn map etched into leather, and a damp journal wrapped in oilcloth. The map showed the surrounding wilderness with 6 red-marked X's, none of which corresponded with any known campsites or ranger stations. Beside each mark, a number had been etched, and 5 of them had been scratched out. In the journal, pages were filled with obsessively scrawled numbers, strange phrases like, "The forest sees in 6, and repeated references to she. But the most chilling entry came at the end. "Only 2 left. Then I go." At the hospital, Noah had begun to speak more openly, but only in fragments, most often after waking from feverish dreams. "We didn't just hide," he told Detective Marlowe in a hushed tone. "We ran all the time. He didn't always find us, but he tried." When asked who he meant, Noah replied, "The man with the broken foot, the one who whistles." He then drew a face, not with eyes or features, but with jagged lines for a mouth, long black streaks where the eyes should be, and teeth like yellow thorns. Meanwhile, Elias whispered to a trauma therapist that there was a hole in the ground they weren't supposed to go near. "I saw him put something in it," he said, "a shoe, and a necklace. It had a name on it, not ours." When pressed, he hesitated before saying, "It said Beth." The name sent ripples through the investigation. Back at the field office, the team cross-referenced missing person cases within a 100-mile radius. One name surfaced almost immediately. Beth Holloway, age 11, disappeared from a school camping trip in Montana 12 years prior. She was never found. Rhodes and Marlowe stared at the old file photo, a girl with red yarn tied in her braids, just like the carvings found in the ravine, just like the statue held by Soline in the drone footage. a new theory emerged. This wasn't just a kidnapping ring. It was a pattern, a system, a network of rotating sites, possibly involving more than one person, possibly mobile. When the forensic team returned from the trench, they brought more evidence. Personal items, small mementos, all buried shallow. There were no bones, no bodies. But one of the objects, a silver bracelet with DC, KM, is etched into it, matched the belongings of a boy named Kyle Martin, who vanished in Idaho in 2014. The pieces were connecting, and with every connection, the horror expanded. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, Sky had begun drawing again, this time using colored crayons from the nurse's station. He sketched a dark cabin nestled under trees, smoke curling from a chimney, and a figure in the distance. "That's where he went when it got cold," he said. "We saw him through the trees." "Did you go there too?" his mother asked. Sky shook his head. "We weren't allowed, but he always did." This detail sent agents rushing to review archival drone footage, finally pinpointing a potential site along the southern cliffside, an area shielded from aerial scans by rocky outcrops and dense pine cover. As they mapped out the terrain, Rhodes asked the question that had begun to haunt them all. If she's keeping them safe, what happened to the others? No one had an answer. But then Noah muttered something chilling in his sleep. "He said I was 4. He said 5 was next. He said 6 had to listen." Rhodes leaned over to the lead profiler. "We're not just dealing with a pair of twisted survivalists. We're watching the choreography of something older, something that believes it's righteous." And across the hills, just beyond the new drone scan, nestled in a clearing no wider than a backyard, the woman called Solene knelt beside a group of children, humming softly as she added another twig to a cold, smokeless fire. Beside her, buried beneath a pile of animal furs, was a tiny notebook. Inside, written in spidery ink, was a list of names. 6 of them. 4 were crossed out. The last 2, Noah, Elias. And beneath them, written in a different hand, one final phrase: "When the circle is complete, the forest sleeps again." By the time the task force deployed toward the cliffside cabin Sky had described, the operation had taken on a tone of desperation, masked as professionalism. Tactical gear was tightened with more urgency. Communications were briefer. The command center, once abuzz with calculated optimism, now vibrated with dread. Agent Rhodes, reviewing the notebook retrieved from the trench, couldn't shake the final line. "When the circle is complete, the forest sleeps again." What did it mean? A countdown, a ritual, a cycle? Beside her, Detective Marlowe scrolled through photos of 6 children who had vanished across the Pacific Northwest over the past 12 years. Every case eerily similar. No ransom demands, no signs of struggle, no evidence left behind. Just children aged 7 to 11, all taken during hikes or family trips. And now, 2 survivors had reappeared, Noah and Elias, speaking in whispers about symbols, ranks, and someone called the Whistler. It was Elias who gave them the next clue. During a therapy session, his hand trembling, he mimicked the sound they were told meant danger. 1 long, 2 short. The therapist froze. That same whistle pattern had been recorded by trail cameras in 2017, near an abandoned ranger station 3 miles from the current site. Back then, it had been dismissed as an animal call. Now, it was a signature. "That's when we had to stop talking," Elias said, "or the man with the limp would come down." Rhodes ordered a silent sweep of the ranger station site. Deep in the overgrown brush, the team uncovered signs of temporary habitation. Ropes strung between trees, burned-out logs, a moldy satchel containing hand-drawn maps, and wooden tokens carved with numbers. 6 again. Always 6. Always in a circle. Back at the hospital, Noah stirred from a long, medicated sleep. Elise sat beside him, gently running her fingers through his hair. When he opened his eyes and whispered, "He wore gloves. He never said our names." "Only our numbers," Elise asked softly. "What number were you?" "I was 4, Noah replied, blinking slowly. "Elias was 5. He said 6 had to be still." Then, as if remembering something too fast, Noah gripped her wrist tightly. "Mom, there were others before us. I heard him say it. 1 and 2 didn't listen." The implications landed like a stone in the stomach. Somewhere, there had been more, and possibly there still were. That evening, Sky, more alert now, was given paper and markers. Quietly, he drew 3 distinct places. 1, a slanted roof cabin buried in moss. 2, a room with lanterns hanging from the ceiling like floating eyes. And 3, a small stone house he labeled in block letters, the Quiet House. When Rhodes arrived to review the sketches, Sky pointed to the last one. "That's where he took them when they didn't obey," he said. "We only went there once." "What happened there?" Rhodes asked gently. Sky didn't answer. He looked out the window instead, as if checking the trees. That night, after a storm briefly knocked out power to the hospital wing, Noah woke up screaming. Elise rushed in as nurses scrambled to calm him. He sobbed into her shoulder, whispering one broken phrase again and again. "The Whistler came in the dark." Meanwhile, out in the reserve, a special drone sweep of the southern cliffs returned a new hit, a shelter hidden beneath a rock overhang just outside the initial scan zone. It had been expertly camouflaged with tree bark and painted cloth. A team was sent in immediately. What they found inside the shelter was simple: a fire pit, children's shoes of varying sizes, and a series of carved initials on the inner wall: L plus EB plus TK plus M. 6 pairings in total. Below them, a message burned into the wood: "The forest keeps what the world forgets." As dawn approached, Rhodes assembled the updated list of names from all confirmed disappearances and matched them to the initials. 4 were clear. The other 2, new. Possibly current, possibly still alive. The circle wasn't just metaphorical, it was method. And someone, or someones, was trying to complete it. The next morning, the forest near Wild Pine Reserve was draped in fog so thick it swallowed sound. Tactical units moved in silence through the southern grid, eyes scanning the branches, ears straining for any unnatural break in the stillness. Agent Rhodes and Detective Marlowe had coordinated with aerial teams, motion sensors, and infrared drones. But so far, the forest yielded only half-truths. Abandoned sites, footprints that led nowhere, remnants of presence. But that changed at 4:27 a.m. when a new drone pass picked up movement along a dry streambed near Split Rock Ridge. A thermal signature, upright, limping, moved steadily north. Then, more heat pings. Smaller, clustered, paused near a collapsed stone outcrop, then scattered like deer. And one figure remained behind, still, watching the sky. The drone zoomed in. Even through the thermal haze, her outline was unmistakable. Soline. Within minutes, 2 teams were dispatched. One would sweep the ridge from the west, the other would flank from the river trail. At command, Rhodes reviewed the trajectory data. The adult figure hadn't run. She simply turned her head upward, smiled faintly at the drone, and slowly stepped back into the trees. The children, however, moved fast, trained, silent, intentional. "Someone taught them how to vanish," Rhodes murmured, "and they're moving with purpose." Meanwhile, at the hospital, Noah had started drawing again. Circles within circles. In the center, a cabin with smoke. Around it, 6 small marks like eyes or stars. In the corner, written in uneven letters, he scrawled, "We saw it. He saw us." Across the room, Elias sat upright in bed, eyes locked on the TV screen even though it was off. He hadn't spoken for an hour. Then, without warning, he turned to Elise and said, "They're coming back." Elise leaned in, heart racing. "Who, sweetie?" "The Whistler and the woman," he shivered. "She told me once, the forest picks, but he decides." Just then, Agent Rhodes entered, holding the recovered journal from the trench. "We found a new page," she said, "dated just a week before the boys were rescued." She handed it to Elise. The page was torn, the ink running in places, but still legible. 4 is clever, 5 is afraid. The circle is almost ready. When they're quiet, they hear the trees speak. Then she comes. Back at the field team's location, the west sweep made visual contact with the trench Soline had been spotted near. It was empty, but footprints, barefoot, adult-sized, led deeper into the forest. At the edge of the clearing, someone had tied 3 small figures made of moss and sticks to a tree limb. One bore the number 6, another 5, and the last, painted in what looked like ash, had no number at all. Rhodes received the image via secure tablet and stared in silence. "She's marking them," she whispered. "Not just tracking, choosing." Then the Eastern team called in. They had found a cave. It was nearly invisible, hidden behind years of brush and sloped rock, its mouth sealed by a wooden plank wall barely hanging in place. A symbol was etched into the stone beside it, 6 lines inside a circle, one violently crossed out. The same icon Sky had drawn. The same one found at the original shelter. Inside, the team moved slowly, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The air smelled of damp wood and old rot. There were makeshift cots, stacks of dried food, and children's books with pages torn out and rewritten in a shaky adult hand. And along the walls, dozens of carvings, twin children, all arranged in mirrored pairs, some smiling, some blank, some broken. Beneath one, scrawled in red marker, were the words, "She only keeps the quiet ones." As the team reached the far chamber, they found a small bundle wrapped in flannel. Inside was a girl's shoe, size 3, and a necklace with the name Beth engraved in the pendant. Rhodes received the update and exhaled slowly. The cave wasn't just a shelter, it was a memorial, or worse, an archive. And outside, somewhere past the drone's range, a faint sound echoed through the pines. One long whistle, too short. The forest was speaking again, and it wasn't finished, dot. By the time the whistle faded into the trees, the agents at Split Rock Ridge had already begun their descent toward a second signal. This one picked up 300 yards from the cave, where a patch of forest showed signs of deliberate concealment. Brush had been tied together with wire. Fallen logs stacked unnaturally to form a blind. A single trail, so narrow it could have been made by deer, twisted deeper into the woods. At its end stood a structure almost indistinguishable from the rock wall behind it. An unmarked cabin, its wood rotted and dark, roof half sunken into the earth, as if the mountain itself had tried to bury it. The front door was chained from the inside, but one side window hung loose on a single rusted hinge. Agent Rhodes crouched low and peered inside. The air that seeped out was sour, like mildew and pennies. "We go in quiet," she instructed. The team slipped through the window and swept the interior, weapons drawn, lights low. There was no one inside. But the silence wasn't empty. It was thick, coiled around every object. Cans stacked in corners, blankets on the floor, a rusted stove, and then they saw the walls. Hundreds of drawings, crude and frantic, were taped, nailed, or carved directly into the timber. All of them showed the same 2 children, sometimes laughing, sometimes sleeping, sometimes hiding behind trees. In a few, their faces were scratched out. In others, a tall figure loomed behind them. No eyes, no mouth, just a head like bark and a long coat that stretched to the floor. One sketch was labeled in a child's handwriting, "Don't make noise, he hears." A narrow door under the stairs creaked open to reveal a crawl space. Inside, beneath stained blankets, agents found a leather-bound notebook, the cover marked with a burnt-in symbol, the 6-line circle, now with 4 of its spokes scratched out. Rhodes opened it slowly. The first page read, "2 little birds, mine to keep. No one knows. No one speaks." The entries that followed spiraled into obsession. They weren't just journal entries. They were instructions. How to ration food. How to change locations. How to train them to forget their names. Numbers are easier. Names make them remember. The final entry chilled the entire team. "One wandered too far. I followed. The others will come. I'm not done." Just as Rhodes closed the notebook, a voice crackled over the radio from an agent stationed outside. "Footprints, fresh, one set, deep heel on the right. He's dragging a leg, headed north." Rhodes was already moving. "He was here," she muttered, "watching." Meanwhile, back at the hospital, Noah had drawn something new. A map. Shaky, childlike, but detailed. He marked a cabin, a tree line, and a hole. He handed it to Elise and whispered, "That's where he put the necklace. And the shoe." Elise froze. "What necklace?" "It had a name," Noah said softly. "Not mine. Beth." Elise stepped into the hallway with the drawing and handed it to Rhodes, who had just returned from the cabin. "We found it," she said. "Everything matches." Elise trembled. "Then it's real. All of it." Elsewhere in the trauma ward, Elias, quiet for days, sat up in bed and spoke to his therapist. "There was only one at first," he said, "but near the end, there were more. They stayed in the trees. One of them always whistled." The therapist leaned in. "What did the others do?" Elias didn't blink. "They waited until it was dark." Across town, in the sheriff's office, drone technician Eli Tron was reviewing archived footage from the initial search 11 months earlier. One sequence, dismissed at the time as an anomaly, now revealed something crucial. On the third pass over the ravine, a corner of camouflage tarp had appeared near a bend in the trail, then vanished on the next loop. Someone had been watching the search effort, Someone had moved between scans. Rhodes had seen enough. This was never just one person, she told Marlowe. It's a web, with watchers, movers, collectors, and whoever Solene is, she's not just surviving, she's coordinating. Back in the forest, agents followed the footprints deeper into the thicket, their breath clouding in the cold. The trail led through a narrow pass, up a ridge, and vanished into a rocky crevice. From somewhere ahead, a crow screeched. Then silence. Rhodes raised her hand. The team froze. In the distance, low and deliberate, came the sound again. One long whistle, too short. And beneath that, softer, almost imperceptible, the sound of children humming. The sound of humming echoed faintly through the crevice, too melodic to be random, too soft to be wind. Agent Rhodes signaled for complete silence. Her team moved forward in slow formation, their boots sinking into damp moss, weapons raised not in anticipation of a firefight, but of something far stranger, something older than violence, older even than language. As they inched through the passage, the walls of stone began to narrow, the air turned cooler. Every movement felt amplified, as if the forest itself were listening. Then the humming stopped, and what replaced it was worse. Nothing. At the end of the crevice, hidden behind a curtain of ferns and thin, reaching branches, was the entrance to a low cave. It had no door, no markings, only dark soil worn smooth by years of quiet footsteps. Rhodes crouched and shone her light inside. The beam caught on the reflective sheen of aged plastic, shredded flannel, and something else. A small pair of eyeglasses, cracked, one temple bent backward. A child's. They entered. The cave was not natural. It had been expanded, reinforced with logs and scavenged plywood. Inside was a single room about 15 feet deep, where the ceiling dipped low and the walls pulsed with dampness. Along the far wall, dozens of small wooden figurines were lined up, hand-carved, detailed, arranged in precise pairs. Some bore yarn-tied braids. Some had teeth carved into their grinning mouths. One was missing an arm. Another had its face deliberately gouged out. To the right, a makeshift cot sat beneath a hanging tarp. On it was a single photograph, creased, water-damaged, but still visible. It showed 6 children sitting cross-legged on forest ground. None were smiling. Behind them stood a tall figure wrapped in cloth, the face blurred by motion. Rhodes turned the photo over. A message was written in smeared graphite. "These ones listen." Then came a whisper, not from the outside, from within the cave. A faint voice, childlike yet distant. "Are you here for me?" Rhodes spun her light toward the sound. In the back corner, beneath a pile of blankets, 2 wide eyes stared out. A boy, maybe 8, maybe younger, pale skin, thin arms. He didn't flinch when the light hit him. "What's your name?" Rhodes asked gently, lowering her voice. "Tommy," the boy said, barely above a breath. Her blood turned to ice. "Tommy? Rivera?" He nodded once, slow. "I was 6, but then she said I wasn't." Rhodes moved forward carefully. "You've been here since New Mexico?" "I think so," Tommy murmured. "I walked a long time. Then she found me. Said the forest picks who stays. I tried to stay quiet." Behind her, one of the agents whispered, "This kid's been gone since 2018. Rhodes crouched. "Are there others, Tommy? More children?" He nodded again. "They don't talk anymore. She says names make them remember. Remembering makes the forest angry." Tommy reached beneath the blanket and pulled out a small piece of paper. A hand-drawn map, marked with 6 symbols. 5 had been crossed out. The 6th, marked in red, had a spiral around it. "She said when the spiral is full, the circle ends," Tommy whispered. Rhodes's calm crackled. "Ma'am," came the voice of an aerial drone pilot. "We just picked up movement, north quadrant, multiple heat signatures. Looks like they're moving fast, 7 total, 1 adult-sized." Rhodes's chest tightened. "Which direction?" "West, toward Hollow Rock, toward the quiet house." Tommy's head jerked. "No," he whispered. "They're going to the circle." Back at the hospital, Elise sat with Noah as he woke from a short nap. He looked up at her and asked softly, "Is the man in the coat still outside?" She swallowed hard. "Why?" "He used to stand at the edge of the trees," Noah said. "He'd wait until we slept. But I never really did." Across the hallway, Elias sat up in his bed, suddenly alert. "He's going to finish the spiral." Rhodes's team exited the cave with Tommy wrapped in an emergency blanket. Medics waited outside to airlift him to the trauma center. Rhodes stared at the boy as the helicopter blades roared overhead. "He wasn't supposed to survive," she said to Marlowe, "but he did, and now the whole thing is unraveling." Marlowe showed her a new photo from a trail camera, one that had just been triggered moments ago. It showed 6 children walking in single file through the trees. In front was Soline. Behind her, trailing, was someone else. A man. Limping, head lowered, coat long. The Whistler. Tommy was right. The circle wasn't just a cycle. It was a ritual, a method, a way to reset something that had been set in motion long ago. "We have less than a day," Rhodes said, watching the monitor as the children vanished deeper into the woods. "She's going to complete the circle before we understand what it really is." And far beyond the reach of the radio towers and drones, nestled in a place no map dared name, the trees swayed gently as the last light faded. From within the stillness, a slow, deliberate whistle rose through the branches. One long, two short. The forest was listening. And the forest had chosen Dot. As the team regrouped at the command center, dusk fell hard and fast over Wild Pine Reserve, turning the landscape into a silhouette of jagged shadows and murmuring pines. Agent Rhodes stood over the tactical map spread across the operations table, red pins marking confirmed locations. Caves, shelters, abandoned cabins, but all eyes were now focused on the northwest sector, a blank wedge of forest with no official trails, no ranger logs, and no name on any modern map. It was Tommy who had called it the Circle. Elias had called it the Quiet House. But to Rhodes, it was now something else entirely. The end point. "Dispatch the teams by 2100 hours, she said. 3 approach vectors, maximum silence, and night vision only. We hit them before sunrise, or we lose the chance forever." 30 minutes later, the convoy moved out. Black trucks hummed through narrow fire roads. Drones launched into the air like swarms of silent fireflies. Mounted teams flanked both sides of the reserve. The only sound was static and breathing. And beyond that, nothing. The forest had gone still again. Too still. That was when Eli Tron, monitoring heat signatures from Drone Relay 7A, leaned forward and whispered, "I've got 'em." A cluster of 6 human-sized blips, no, 7, just off a ridge marked only on old survey maps from the 1940s. They're heading downslope, toward a ravine. That's where she's taking them. In the hospital, Noah sat up in his bed, eyes wide, looking straight through the wall, as if something far beyond the room had called to him. Elise froze at the sight. "What is it, sweetie?" He blinked. "They're almost there." "Who?" she asked, voice shaking. "6, he whispered. "Then she sleeps." Elise stepped into the hall and called Rhodes. "They're finishing it. Right now. He told me, when the 6th is quiet, the forest goes dark." Rhodes relayed the message to the forward teams, who now descended toward the ravine. The terrain narrowed into a wedge, bordered by vertical cliffs and choked with branches like claws. Then came the break. A clearing, flat and circular, no more than 40 feet across. In its center, a stone structure squatted, like something unearthed from myth. It had no windows, no proper door, only a split in the wall draped with faded canvas. The outside was painted with symbols in ash and blood. 6 spokes inside a circle, 5 of them crossed out. And on the 6th spoke, fresh, wet, was a red handprint. Rhodes gave the signal. Her team encircled the structure with quiet precision. No sound emerged. Not footsteps, not breathing. The agents breached together. Inside was a single room, fire-blackened walls, straw bedding, animal pelts, and children, 6 of them, sitting silently in a semicircle, eyes wide but unfocused. They did not scream. They did not run. They simply looked. Behind them stood Soline. She didn't move when the lights hit her. Her hair was wrapped in fabric. Her hands were painted with soot. She looked at Rhodes like she'd been expecting her. "They are safe," she said softly. "They belong to the forest now." "Step away from the children," Rhodes said. "Now." But Soline only tilted her head. "The 6th hasn't spoken yet. I was waiting. She must be quiet too. Then the cycle closes." Rhodes moved forward, gun raised. Behind her, agents pulled the children out one by one. They did not resist. They blinked in the light like animals pulled from the dark. Soline didn't run. But then, a sound from behind the stone wall. A shuffle. A limp. Rhodes turned as a shadow stepped from the rear of the chamber. The Whistler. He was taller than expected, wiry, his skin sunken and pale, beard tangled, eyes wild but glistening with focus. In one hand, he held a crude whistle carved from bone, in the other, a length of wire. He didn't speak. He just raised the whistle to his lips. "Drop it!" Rhodes shouted. "Now!" But he blew. One long, two short. The children froze. The sixth, a girl named Mira, covered her ears. Rhodes fired. The whistler dropped before the second whistle left his lips. Solene screamed, not in grief, but in rage. "You don't understand," she howled. "They were never lost. They were saved." Agents moved to subdue her, but she collapsed to the ground, weeping into her shawl. The children were extracted immediately. Helicopters lifted from a clearing 15 minutes later, carrying the stolen six to warmth, food, and safety. Solene and the whistler were taken into custody, one silent, the other murmuring about forests, circles, and gifts from the trees. The cave was sealed, the ravine marked as restricted. But even as the sun rose and command celebrated what felt like a rescue, Rhodes couldn't shake the final look in Solene's eyes. Not anger, not madness, but certainty, as if something was still unfinished. Back at the hospital, Noah stirred from sleep and turned to Elise. "She's not gone," he whispered. "She's just waiting." By the third day after the rescue, the 6 recovered children had been relocated to a specialized trauma care unit under federal protection. Though their physical health stabilized quickly, dehydration reversed, bruises documented, minor infections treated, what baffled doctors and agents alike was their silence. None of them had spoken a single word. Not Mira, not Emmett, not the boy with the scar over his eyebrow, nor the girl with the crooked braid who refused to let go of a small wooden figure. They sat in rooms with their backs to corners, eyes scanning walls, heads snapping toward even the quietest sounds, like they were waiting for something to follow them through the walls, or worse, for someone. Agent Rhodes sat at the edge of an observation room, her notepad untouched, her coffee cold. "It's as if they were trained not to respond," the attending psychiatrist whispered beside her. "Conditioned, through fear, repetition, something deeper, their silence. It's not shock, it's obedience." Meanwhile, in a secure federal holding cell 120 miles away, Solene sat cross-legged on a metal bed, her shawl removed, revealing long gray hair matted into thick strands like rope. She hadn't spoken since her arrest. No screams, no whispering, just a calm, haunting stillness. When Detective Marlowe entered to begin the preliminary interview, she turned slowly and smiled. "They came to me," she said, her voice gravel-thin. "All of them, lost and loud. But the forest wants quiet." She placed a hand over her heart. "I gave them peace." Marlowe didn't flinch. "Where were you planning to take them?" Solene tilted her head. "Nowhere. They were already home. You were the trespassers." Rhodes entered then, dropping a photograph of the cave carvings onto the table. "Who made these?" Solene looked down and traced one of the outlines with her finger. "He did." "Reed?" Marlowe asked. "No," Solene smiled wider. "The one before him." Rhodes froze. "Before?" Solene's eyes gleamed. "He found the place. I gave it purpose." Back at the hospital, Noah Reyes was sitting with Elias when their nurse walked in with a tablet. "Do you want to see them?" she asked gently, swiping to a live feed of the rescued 6. Noah stared. "That's Mira," he said. "She was always quiet, even before." Elias leaned forward. "Where's the other one?" The nurse looked puzzled. "Other?" "There were 7, Elias whispered, "not 6. Rhodes was called immediately. She reviewed all surveillance, personnel logs, drone scans from the morning of the rescue. 6 children accounted for. 1 adult female, 1 male suspect. No missing entries, no gaps. Until they found it. A 2-second lapse in drone feed 11C. A static glitch. At the exact moment the children were being extracted from the stone structure. "Replay it again," Rhodes said. The tech complied. On the frame just before the glitch, 6 children were standing in the clearing. But in the blurred corner, barely distinguishable, was a 7th figure, smaller than the others, crouched near the base of a tree. Gone the next frame, Rhodes swore. "We missed one." Back in Solene's cell, Rhodes confronted her with the still image. "Who is this?" Solene didn't blink. "You didn't miss her. She chose to stay." "Name?" Solene finally leaned forward, voice low, eyes distant. "They called her Wren." Rhodes turned on her heel. "Find her!" Across the forest, thermal drones were redeployed. Bloodhounds flown in from Montana, the grid was widened. But no fresh heat signatures were detected. No footprints. Only pine needles and wind. Meanwhile, the children at the center remained silent, except for Mira. That night, she woke up from a dead sleep, screaming a single word. "Wren!" They found her in the hallway, curled into a corner, clutching her throat. "She's still there," Mira whispered, but the forest hid her. It chose her. The following day, Agent Rhodes returned to the ravine, alone. She stood in the same stone circle where the rescue had taken place. The symbols had been erased, the structure dismantled, but the ground still felt heavy, like something pressed against it from below. She called out into the woods. "Wren, if you're out here, we can help you. You don't have to hide." Silence. Then, just as she turned to leave, a whisper came on the wind. 6 was never the end. Rhodes turned back, heart hammering, but there was nothing. No movement. Just trees, just shadows, and the faintest sound in the distance. One long whistle, too short. Not a memory, not an echo, a warning. The forest didn't sleep after that. Not even for a moment. Agent Rhodes returned from the ravine colder than she'd ever felt before. The whisper still turning in her mind, worming through her logic like smoke in a locked room. 6 was never the end. At the trauma center, the children began to shift. Not in health, but in behavior. Emmett started standing at the window every morning, at precisely 4:17 a.m., staring out at nothing, lips parted, eyes glazed. Mira refused to eat unless her food was arranged in 6 perfect slices. The girl with the crooked braid began folding tissue paper into the shape of trees, lining them along her bed like some kind of miniature forest. The boy with the scar, Tommy, whispered in his sleep, a single sentence on repeat. "She's still counting." Dr. Lohman, the lead psychiatrist, called Rhodes into the observation room. "They're not reintegrating," she said flatly. "They're synchronizing. I've never seen this before. It's like something is still instructing them." Rhodes stared at the children through the two-way glass and said, without turning, "Not something. Someone." Meanwhile, across the country, satellite pings and drone sweeps of Wild Pine Reserve turned up nothing. Wren, if that was her real name, was gone. Vanished the way the others once had. Only she hadn't been taken. She had chosen to stay. And if Solene was to be believed, that meant she had accepted something the others hadn't. That night, at exactly 2:43 a.m., a wildlife camera placed near a section of the forest previously believed inactive flickered to life. It caught 3 frames before the batteries died. One of a tall woman in layered rags walking through the trees with something bundled against her chest. One of the same woman placing that bundle at the base of a stone pillar. And one final frame, a child's face, barely visible, peering out from behind her shoulder. Wren, still alive, still with her. And then, nothing. When Rhodes reviewed the footage in the command van the next morning, she felt her chest tighten in a way it hadn't even when she'd first seen Noah and Elias's rescue footage. Because in the first frame, behind the woman, barely distinguishable in the tree line, was a second figure. Thin, male, hunched, limping. The Whistler. "We killed him," she whispered. "I saw him fall." The tech zoomed in. The figure wasn't clear, just a silhouette. But there was no mistaking the dragging leg, the slouched shoulder, the glint of something metallic in his hand. Or, the tech offered quietly, he never fell at all. Rhodes didn't respond. She just stood, mouth dry, eyes fixed. Back at the trauma unit, Mira awoke screaming from a seizure-like episode. "The circle never ends," she cried. "It just gets bigger." Nurses rushed in to sedate her, but she fought, clutching the blanket to her chest and whispering, "She told me they're not done. There are more. There are always more." That night, Agent Rhodes stood alone in the incident archive room, surrounded by maps, footage, psychological evaluations, hand-carved figures, blood-stained symbols, journal entries, all pointing to the same terrifying conclusion. Solene and the Whistler weren't working alone. They were just part of something larger, something older, something that lived not in names or towns or systems, but in silence, in circles, in forgotten trails and mouths that don't scream. At 3:12 a.m., her burner phone rang, a number only one person had, Eli Tran. "You need to see something," he said, voice tight. He sent a drone clip, uncut, unfiltered, recorded 4 hours earlier. Rhodes opened the file. The drone hovered over a ridge deep in the forest. its thermal camera catching a cluster of 9 heat signatures, 8 small, 1 tall. Then the camera jerked, reoriented, and framed a large circular clearing. At its center, figures stood in formation, children and adults, perfectly spaced like a clock. And at the head, her arms outstretched, stood Ren, smiling, not lost, not frightened, but leading. "Oh my God," Rhodes whispered. She wasn't a victim. She was a successor. Then the final frame froze on Ren lifting something to her lips. It wasn't a whistle. It was a carved pipe, long and narrow. She blew once, one long note, then 2 short. And in the distance, through the cold, through the brush, through the pitch-dark screen, something responded. Another whistle, another child, a new voice. The drone crashed a minute later. No signal, no recovery, no trace. Rhodes lowered the screen and said what no one had dared to say aloud. "They're building a new circle." And across the nation, in 4 different states, on the same morning, 4 families reported children missing, vanished from locked homes, backyard tents, and scout camps. No signs of forced entry, no footprints, only a small carved figure left in each child's place. 6 lines in a circle, 1 newly drawn, none crossed out. Somewhere deep in the woods, the forest listened again, because the whistle had never stopped, it had only waited. What began as a desperate search for 2 missing boys has unraveled into something far older, far colder, and far more calculated than anyone could have imagined. The children were never simply taken, they were chosen. And the forest, silent and watchful, has been keeping count all along. Though authorities rescued 6, 1 remained. And now, Ren walks the woods not as a lost girl, but as a keeper of the circle, her whistle calling others who hear what most cannot. The whistler may have fallen, but the ritual did not die with him. It evolved. It waits. Somewhere in the dark, new footsteps echo where old ones once faded. And as more families wake to find empty beds and carved wooden figures in their place, one truth becomes clear. The forest never forgets. The circle never closes. It only begins again.